Another episode of Poly Talks, and today we will be discussing the recent allegations and not so recent allegations that have been brought forth about Republican Representative George Santos. Now, if you don't know who this is, George Santos is a Republican representative from New York's 3rd Congressional District. In 2020, he ran an unsuccessful congressional campaign, although late last year, he was successful in his congressional bid in what was considered an upset by many. But now, even as he has been elected, many new allegations have been brought forth since this election date, which legitimately put him in a dire position, not only going into the 2024 elections, but also in the not so distant future as well, as he faces these allegations. So I just want to begin with showing you a brief timeline. And what's not so important here are the allegations, which range from his sexuality to religion, etc. Although, as you can see at first, they're relatively light, and then comes the election date, November 8th, and following that, many new allegations have surfaced, all of which in a span of a few rapid weeks. And what this has created is a problematic situation for Republicans and Santos especially, because for Republicans, they have a 222 to 213 seat majority in the House, and George Santos's resignation will pose massive problems for Republicans because, as we had mentioned earlier, this is slightly Democratic-leaning district, and especially after the Santos affair, perhaps voters in this district may choose to buck a Democrat instead. So, if George Santos does resign, then Democrats have a great chance of picking up a seat in this New York district, which would further shrink the Republican majority, and that is something that McCarthy does not want to happen, as he's looking to simply corral all the power he can in this new House. So, that puts Republicans in a difficult situation, as of course he is also a liability for Republicans. And New York Republicans actually recently just came out with a statement that they want George Santos gone. They want him to resign, and that is understandable because he is frankly an embarrassment to their party, and he undermines their credibility as this figure who essentially has this entire persona crafted of lies and is not a genuine person and has already been disgraced yet so far. And so the New York Republican position is even more extreme than the House Republican position. But the fact that Republicans are certainly not openly defending George Santos poses a major question about whether he will resign. Now, to offer my current thoughts, I do not believe that George Santos will resign. And the answer is simply he doesn't, besides from, of course, the pressure of being a liability in this election success, there's actually nothing that would force him to resign, barring like a federal investigation. So he is free to resign or remain as he chooses. And considering all the factors I mentioned above, the GOP majority, he probably will stay in Congress. Although certainly, I believe, come 2024, I find it very unlikely that Santos would win another election in New York's 3rd district. It's not impossible. American voters often have short memories, and this may be a forgotten affair by the time we reach 2024, but still, I find it very unlikely. And also, even assuming George Santos could make it to the general election, he might not win, but there's also the possibility he is primaried, of course, and he will certainly face opposition. So George Santos has just been elected to a single term. He's scarcely been in Congress for a few weeks, and he's already embattled and faces major questions regarding his political future, which frankly I think will, once his term has been served, will put a nail in the coffin of his political future. I do not see him coming back from these sorts of allegations, especially as Republicans themselves. Typically, we do not see this. It happened a little bit in the following 2018, when Al Franken was forced to resign by several members of the Democratic Party. Of course, the difference then is that Democrats could afford it because there would simply be a Democratic senator appointed in his seat, and there would be a special election. Although Minnesota is not a particularly competitive state for Democrats, especially going into, I believe, I forget whether this election was 2018 or 2020, but neither were very competitive years for Minnesota on the Senate level, which means that Democrats probably saw this as a perfect opportunity to, show their statements on the allegations he was facing, while still ensuring they would maintain their majority as it stood. Although the case is different here because, like I said, this is a competitive election, competitive district, and there's a legitimate chance that Democrats could win the seat if George Santos did end up resigning. And we can already say this district was expected to go to Democrats this election, as were many districts in New York. As I had mentioned in previous videos a few weeks ago, Democrats did very poorly in New York, and if they had done a much better performance in New York, I believe they would have retained the House majority. So this is certainly a focal point. But Democrats potentially seek redemption here should George Santos resign. So I just want to close out by saying this was a little recap of George Santos and his many allegations. I will not dive into the specific allegations because, first of all, there are many of them, and also it is not particularly relevant. The main picture is George Santos has many alter egos and personas, and he is clearly not a genuine person in the eyes of House Democrats. And most Republicans, especially New York Republicans, even including House Republicans, even if they would not admit it, he is still certainly weighing on everyone's minds as a negative burden to the party, in the same way as Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert, but perhaps even more outspoken and in the news media. So it will be interesting to monitor in the coming weeks whether George Santos will give in to pressure, whether Republicans in the House will pursue any form of sanctions against him. Of course, that is an option. Or whether George Santos will remain in power for the rest of his term, and if so, we will see whether he decides to run again, and if so, if he has any realistic shot of winning. So that was a quick recap of a current political event. I hope you enjoyed. See you in another episode very, very soon.